مصير السكريات الناتجة عن عملية البناء الضوئي. خلال الأسابيع الماضية تم مناقشة ودراسة عملية البناء الضوئي، وقد عرفنا عملية البناء الضوئي بأنها العملية التي تستخدم فيها الكائنات ذاتية التغذية طاقة الضوء الشمس لبناء الكربوهيدرات باستخدام مواد غير عضوية بسيطة مثل ثاني أكسيد الكربون والماء. هل تستطيعين كتابة المعادلة الكيميائية لعملية البناء الضوئي؟ أحسنتم. الشكل المقابل يمثل المعادلة الكيميائية لعملية البناء الضوئي. تتم عملية البناء الضوئي داخل البلاستيدات الخضراء، ومن المهم جداً معرفة تركيب البلاستيدات الخضراء لفهم عملية البناء الضوئي. أحسنتم. كما علمنا أن عملية البناء الضوئي عملية معقدة، فهي تحدث من خلال عمليتين: المرحلة الأولى وهي التفاعلات الضوئية، والمرحلة الثانية هي التفاعلات اللاضوئية. في المرحلة الأولى تمتص الكلوروفيل بالجرانة الضوء الشمسي، وينتج عن هذه التفاعلات أيونات الهيدروجين، غاز الأكسجين، والمركبين ATP و NADPH. في المرحلة الثانية التفاعلات غير معتمدة على الضوء أو التفاعلات اللاضوئية أو دورة كالفن. يتم استخدام الطاقة التي تم إنتاجها في المرحلة الأولى وهي ATP و NADPH، ويتم اختزال غاز ثاني أكسيد الكربون بواسطة الهيدروجين ليعطي السكر. أحسنتم. عملية البناء الضوئي تتم عن طريق مرحلتين: مرحلة التفاعلات المعتمدة على الضوء ومرحلة التفاعلات الغير معتمدة على الضوء. نتيجة التفاعلات الكيميائية في عملية البناء الضوئي ينتج ما يعرف بالسكر. ولكن يا ترى ما مصير هذا السكر الناتج عن عملية البناء الضوئي؟ جميع الكائنات ذاتية التغذية وغير ذاتية التغذية تحول طاقة الجلوكوز إلى طاقة تخزن في مركب ATP، وتستخدم هذه الطاقة في جميع الوظائف الحيوية للكائن الحي. مركب الطاقة ATP كثير الذكر في الأحياء، لذلك من المهم معرفة المقصود من مركب الطاقة ATP. لنشاهد هذا الفيديو معا.
ATP. We love it. You'll find ATP in so much of our science art, whether it's a GIF of a mitochondrion or cell transport, or a comic about cellular respiration or fermentation, you'll see ATP mentioned. So, why the big deal? Why is it all over the place? Many times, students will get it in their mind that it is an energy currency of some kind. When I first started studying biology, I noticed that in textbooks, it's often represented like
يعتبر ال ATP من المركبات كثيرا ما يتم ذكرها في مواضيع الأحياء، حتى يتم تشبيهه بأنه يشبه العملة المالية في داخل أجسام الكائنات الحية.
the starburst thing or thunderbolt. And I guess in my mind, I imagined it was like some big blast of energy that helped the cell do things. And by do things, I mean that we need ATP to do many cellular processes. Examples include active transport, such as when a cell is trying to move something against its concentration gradient, or its role in muscle contraction with the actin and myosin cross bridge. We need another video for that. ATP is critical for many types of cell signaling. You need your cells to be able to communicate. Those are all just some examples. But what is
يتم استخدام ال ATP في كثير من التفاعلات في أجسامنا، في حركة العضلات، في الإحساس وغيرها من الوظائف. لذلك من المهم جدا فهم ما معنى كلمة ATP أو ما المقصود ب ATP.
How do we get it? And how does it work? Those are the basics of what we're going to focus on in this short video. So, what is ATP? If you remember the 4 major biomolecules, ATP would fit in with nucleic acids. Yes, like DNA and RNA. ATP is a nucleotide derivative, so it has those 3 parts you'd see in DNA or RNA nucleotides: phosphate, sugar, base, but it actually has 3 phosphates. ATP is short for its full name, adenosine triphosphate. This fancy name is helpful as it tells you that it contains the nitrogenous base known as adenine and 3 phosphates, hence the tri in adenosine triphosphate. Its sugar is ribose. How do you get ATP? All cells need ATP, and so they need processes that can be used to generate it. But the process can differ. It might involve oxygen, such as aerobic cellular respiration. It might not involve oxygen, such as anaerobic respiration or fermentation.
يتم الحصول على ال ATP بطريقتين، أما بتكون بالتنفس اللاهوائي أو التنفس الهوائي، وستتم مناقشة هذه المواضيع في فصول قادمة إن شاء الله.
During cellular respiration, plants break down the glucose they made from photosynthesis to make ATP. During cellular respiration, animals break down the glucose they consumed to make ATP. And it's not just plants and animals. Bacteria, fungi, protists, and archaea, they all need to make ATP. We have a video on cellular respiration.
جميع الكائنات الحية، نباتات، حيوانات، بكتيريا، تتم إنتاج أجسامها مركب ال ATP.
Another one on fermentation that can be helpful to understand the process. But one thing that we do want to mention about making ATP is it's important to understand it is part of a cycle. With the ATP cycle, you have ATP, which can be hydrolyzed, releasing energy and losing one of its phosphates in this process. A process like cellular respiration can provide the energy needed to add a phosphate to ADP in order to regenerate ATP again, which is
يجب أن نفهم أن ال ATP تفاعلات تتم عن طريق حلقة، فيتم عملية كسر أحد الروابط وإضافتها، وإضافة إنتاج الطاقة وإخراج الطاقة.
important as ATP can be used quickly. This brings us to how ATP is able to work. So how does ATP work? It's not just about ATP being hydrolyzed and releasing energy, it's more than that. Okay, honestly, it's more than our short video can go into, which is why we provide some further reading links, but let's look at some basics. So when ATP is hydrolyzed, meaning here it involves the addition of water, it's not really that the bond between the second and third phosphate itself is a super strong bond. It's actually more that the bond between the second and third phosphate contributes to this ATP being unstable. These phosphates with their negative charges don't like being arranged like this. The change from ATP, losing its third phosphate, to become the more stable ADP is an exergonic reaction and releases free energy. A popular example for understanding ATP is to use the spring illustration, like a wire spring. Consider how you might compress the spring. ATP would be modeled by that compressed spring, and then you would let it go until it just goes into this relaxed state, which would be represented by ADP. When ATP is hydrolyzed, if the energy was just released, it will likely not be useful for a cell if it's not actually coupled to something that needs it. Thankfully, the energy release can be coupled to endergonic processes that the cell needs to do. This can occur when the phosphate from the ATP is transferred to a molecule that is going to be acted upon. For example, this cell transport protein here is supposed to move some kind of molecule against its concentration gradient. Recall that if it was passive transport, these molecules would be moving from high to low concentration. But in active transport, thanks to ATP, this protein can move them against the gradient. When the phosphate is transferred to this protein, we say the protein has been phosphorylated. Sounds powerful. We can say in our example that this protein is more reactive and less stable in this form, this phosphorylated intermediate state. When it reverts into its original, more stable shape, it can assist in moving them the other direction. So, from marveling at the beating of a single cilia hair, or chromosomes being separated in cell division, or binding the correct amino acid on a tRNA, I could go on. We hope that little ATP symbol will mean something every time you see it. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
عندما يتم إنتاج جزيئات السكر، تكون الكائنات ذاتية التغذية أول من يستهلكها. على سبيل المثال، الأشجار العملاقة بحاجة إلى طاقة لجميع خلاياها، وذلك لأن لها أجهزة نقل السوائل التي تنقل السكريات على شكل سكروز وجزيئات عالية من الطاقة من الأوراق إلى الخلايا الأخرى.
In the previous section, we have learned about transportation in human beings. Now, let us learn transportation in plants. As we've discussed earlier, plants prepare their own food using simple compound inorganic sources such as CO2, water, along with some raw materials, and photosynthesize energy in the presence of sunlight and stored in the chlorophyll of leaves. The plants require raw materials like soil, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other minerals to build their bodies. The plants absorb raw materials from soil with the help of roots, which are in contact with the soil. If distance between soil, root, and chlorophyll is more, energy needed is less And raw materials can easily diffuse into all parts of plant body. If distance between soil, root, and chlorophyll is large, it needs much energy, and raw materials cannot diffuse easily. System of transportation is essential. Example, tall trees. The energy requirement for transportation also varies according to plant structure.
هناك علاقة طردية ما بين مساحة أو طول الشجرة وما بين الطاقة المستهلكة لإيصال المواد اللي موجودة بالتربة إلى النبتة أو إلى الأوراق لتتم عملية بناء عملية البناء الضوئي.
As plants do not move and plant bodies have large dead cells in many tissue, as a result, plants have low energy needs and use slow transport system. In case of tall plants, distance over transport system is large. Why do plants need a transport system? Plants need water, mineral salts, and raw materials for photosynthesis in order to survive.
لماذا يحتاج النبات إلى نظام لنقل المواد خلاله أو لنظام نقل؟ لأن النبات يحتاج إلى الماء والمعادن والثاني أكسيد الكربون حتى يستطيع أن يعيش لعمل عملية البناء الضوئي.
The water and mineral salts from soil is transported into plants through roots. These can only be transported through the water carrying tubes in the stem, also known as xylem. Products of photosynthesis prepared in the leaves are to be transported to the other parts of plants. This can only be transported by the food-carrying tubes, also known as phloem.
هناك نظامين للنقل، هناك الخشب لنقل الماء من التربة إلى الأوراق، وهناك اللحاء يتم نقل المواد السكريات اللي تم إنتاجها في الورقة إلى إلى النبتة. فإذا أنا عندي النظام النقل في النباتات نوعين، النوع الأول للماء والمعادن المذابة فيه ويعرف بالخشب، اللحاء للسكريات الناتجة من الأوراق.
Transport of water. In xylem, tissue vessels and tracheids are the two types of transport tissue in plants. Both vessels and tracheids consist of thick cell walls. Tracheids are single-celled, shorter in length, whereas vessels are several-celled and much longer than tracheids. In xylem, vessels and tracheids of root stem and leaves are interconnected to facilitate continuous water conduction system to all parts of plant. The water transport upwards against force of gravity with the help of xylem vessels. In the movement of water, upwards plants have two types of strategies. Absorption of water. As the xylem vessels, cells of root are in contact with soil, it actively absorbs the water ions. When root is in contact with the soil, soil has more concentration of water and root has less concentration, obviously. A difference in concentration of ions is present in between the root and soil. To balance the difference in water ions between root and soil, water moves into root, which means a steadily or continuous movement of water into xylem of roots, which creates column of water steadily pushing upwards. In xylem, the flow of water is bulk flow, and negative pressure facilitates movement of water and minerals into roots. Transpiration of water. Transpiration is nothing but of evaporation of water molecules from stomata of leaves into atmosphere. Stomata are the guard cells. In definition, transpiration is defined as the loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as transpiration. The loss of water molecules or evaporation of water molecules through leaves creates suction or root pressure, pulls water upwards through xylem cells of root. Thus, the losses of water through stomata of leaves are replaced by suction of water through xylem vessels in the leaf. It also helps in temperature regulation. During the day, transpiration helps in conduction of water through xylem vessels and maintains balance of ions between root and soil. During nights, root pressure occurs due to difference in concentration of active ions between root and soil, help in conduction of water. Phloem. Phloem is another conducting tissue in the transport of foods. The structure of phloem consists of conducting cells called sieve elements, which are thick, circular, and elongated cells. The food that is synthesized in photosynthesis are soluble products like sucrose and nutrients, carbohydrates, etc. are transported through phloem.
شرح كيف يتم انتقال الماء. فما علاقته في الطاقة؟ طبعا أنا عندي اختلاف التراكيز ما بين التربة والنبتة، وإني أنا أخلي الماء يدخل إلى الجذور يحتاج إلى صرف طاقة. طبعا النظام هذا راح ندرسه في الأسبوع القادم بتفصيل أكثر. طريقة النقل الثانية اللي هي اللحاء. النبتة تقوم بعملية البناء الضوئي أو تقوم بإنتاج 3 أنواع من المواد اللي هي السكروز والكربوهيدرات والنيوترينت، وهذيلا راح يتم عملية نقلهم عن طريق اللحاء.
In upward and downward directions to all parts of plant, photosynthesis is called translocation. It can be done by using the energy in the form ATP, adenosine triphosphate, produced by photosynthesis. Phloem also transports amino acids and other substances. These are especially transported to fruits and seeds for storage, and food transported to roots for the requirement of energy in the process of absorption of water from soil to roots. Sucrose is transferred into phloem by using energy from ATP molecules, leads to increase the osmotic pressure of the tissues, and water moves into phloem and materials in the phloem to tissues which have less pressure. For example, in the spring, sugar stored in root or stem tissue would be transported to the
تستخدم النباتات بعضاً من الجلوكوز للنمو، وتكون النباتات جزيئات تركيبية مثل السلولوز عن طريق ربط العديد من جزيئات الجلوكوز في سلاسل طويلة. السلولوز تتكون من النشويات. يعد السلولوز أكثر المواد وفرة تنتجها النباتات الحية، وهو يكسب التراكيب النباتية القوة والصلابة، والقليل من الكائنات الحية يمكنها استخدام السلولوز كمصدر للطاقة. مثال على الكائنات التي لها القدرة على استخدام السلولوز كمصدر للطاقة البكتيريا التي تعيش في القناة الهضمية للأبقار، وتعتبر مثالاً للكائنات التي تتمكن من استخدام السلولوز.
At the heart of this bond is the remarkable biology of the cow. A cow can eat pretty much anything and miraculously transform it into milk, meat, and a whole range of other products that sustain our daily lives.
The key to the cow's success lies here, the rumen. It's sort of the belief of every school child that the cow has 4 stomachs. That's not really true. What it has is one true stomach, the abomasum, which is exactly the same as our stomach. Upstream of that is a multi-compartmental fermentation vat, fermentation chamber, wherein live the microbes. Now, when the cow goes out to graze, she eats the grass really as quickly as possible and swallows it almost unchanged. That comes into the rumen, and at that point, it's really quite difficult for the microbes to penetrate through the cell wall and start the chemical digestion of the plant fiber. So what the cow has also evolved is this really elegant mechanism of rumination. In this, she moves the food round in the rumen, and then a bolus of food is regurgitated, passes up to the mouth, and then she takes it in her mouth and chews it rather as old cowboys would chew tobacco, 20 chews on one side, 20 chews on the other. This breaks it up, and it comes back down again into the rumen. The microbes, having done their work, then are passed out of the fermentation chamber into the abomasum, where they heroically die and give up their lives to provide protein for the cow to produce milk and meat for ourselves.
تخزن معظم النباتات الجلوكوز العالي الطاقة في صورة نشويات، لا تستخدم مباشرة لإنتاج الطاقة أو التراكيب المختلفة. ومثل السلولوز تتكون النشويات من سلاسل من جزيئات الجلوكوز، ولكن ترتبط ببعضها البعض بطريقة مختلفة عن ارتباطها في جزيئات الجلوكوز. توجد النشويات في الأغذية النباتية مثل الذرة والبطاطس والقمح. هل تستطيع رسم مخطط سهمي لمصير السكريات في النباتات؟ أحسنتي. كما تستهلك النباتات والكائنات ذاتية التغذية الطاقة، تستهلك كائنات غير ذاتية التغذية السكر المخزن في النباتات، ثم تهضم النشويات إلى جلوكوز وتستخدمها كطاقة مختزنة من أجل احتياجاتها من الطاقة ولتكوين التراكيب المختلفة في أجسامها. وأي جزئيات بالجلوكوز عالي الطاقة لا يتم استخدامه يمكن أن يختزن مرة أخرى كجلايكوجين يخزن في الكبد في الكائنات غير ذاتية التغذية.